Warning: the radio broadcast you are about to hear was made by men and for men. It may at times seem a little rough around the edges, brash, and certainly not canonically approved by papal authority. But its content may indeed challenge you to become the man, father, husband God has called you to be. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to another week of The Obligation. From our spooky music intro, you might have an idea of where today's show is heading. In this episode, we are picking up from last week where we left off from our conversation with Charles Fraune, the author of the book Slaying Dragons, What Exorcists See and What We Should Know. Charles and I were discussing the realities of hell and moving towards what is going on in the world today from a spiritual perspective. The great need for prayer and continued relationship with God, and the awareness of the spiritual realities going on all around us. We'll also make our way into the topic of possession, the practice of Halloween, and the feasts of All Saints and All Souls Day. So let's get back to our conversation. The most impactful prayer I've ever had when I'm praying is when I'm not saying anything and I'm letting Him speak. And, there's one time specifically, I remember I was sitting there and I had a lot of things going on in my life at the time, and I was just going over them and over them. You know, I need help with this, I need help, and I need help, and all this, that, and just my whole litany of woes. And all I heard was, let me. I've spoken about that so many times, but he just, it wasn't out loud, but it was, let me, just let me do it, And that, from that day forward, like, I really have remembered that, and I'll just, in silence, I'll let Him speak, and he can, it's, and I'm not like, having divine revelation or anything, but I think he's very subtle, and very quiet, and He will guide us if we just have that openness to Him. And I say that because I feel like the subtleness and quietness of God's approach, is the same approach that the devil will use as well, many times. There'll be some times in our life where God won't be as subtle, and there'll be things we'll stand up and be like, wow, I can't believe God let that happen, and wow, I've been blessed, and he's really, and there are times in my life I can look back and say, well, yes, wow, that was a huge thing. Like I didn't, maybe at the time didn't catch it, but looking back now, like, wow, that was huge. Same thing with the devil, though. I think, there are times where, maybe something will pop up on our computer screen, and we know that's blatant. Like that's a easy, yes or no. You either click it or you exit out, and you get it off the screen or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, so I think there is that, but I think they're fewer, because I think more times than not, they're going to be the subtle things, and they're not going to be like, subtly building up to go kill someone, but it's going to be a subtle thing where things in the house get a little edgy. Mom gets a little unnerved, dad gets a little unnerved, and then one of the kids screams, and then before you know it, it's subtle, it's building, boom. Or it's just something, an everyday experience. Maybe you're just driving and somebody does something subtle, and it can. So I guess I was just trying to make a comparison. I feel like he's very cunning. The devil, we know, is cunning. He knows our faults. He knows, what we're capable of falling into. He knows what we're inclined to fall into. And so I think he'll throw the little things here, and they build. And that's where, we have, the venial sins kind of come in, and we just kind of accept the venial sins. And now I'm not doing anything horrible. I'm still going to communion. I can go to church, I'm not doing anything horrible. And then that's, we're weakened. They don't necessarily equal up to a mortal sin, we know, but they certainly weaken us. Just, slight drip of oil on a white cloth. At first, you can't even see it. And maybe the first 10 drops, you don't see it. But eventually, it's going to get a little soiled, and we know what happens next. So,
one priest gave the image of the devil sneaks in to get a toehold, like he just barely sneaks in, then a foothold, and then a stronghold. And then if you don't block him at the beginning, he's going to establish himself, and then he's going to grow and bring in his friends. and eventually crush us by leading us into a mortal sin. And the imagery you were using earlier made me think that God and the devil both work on our passions. The Holy Spirit tries to calm us and to order our passions towards reason, governing us by reason and truth and grace. And then the devil tries to agitate the passions and push on the passions. When you stub your toe, he pushes on the passion of anger in a disordered way. You try to like lash out, like say something bad, or they did that on purpose. And so all of those, and then it's real subtle. Sometimes, like this is why spiritual warfare is important, because the more you know it's happening, the more you'll look for it and the more you'll dismiss it. Because one exorcist said, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between your own thoughts and a temptation. So you may think, oh, I'm just a bad person. But what it really is this demon who's figured out the button to push, and he does it every time. But it's not that you're a bad person. It's just you have this weakness. And let's say you're not even responding to the demon. You're just annoyed by the temptation. So the devil's trying to win there by agitating you. To make you think you're a bad person, but he's just pushing these buttons. So if you don't know that background battle is happening, you're not going to like invoke the name of Jesus against it or go to confession more often, even for the venial sins. But yeah, I think the passions are where they try to control us. And once we hand over the passions completely, we are like puppets to the devil. And then as the imagery of the subtle versus the loud, if you think about this world, it's so loud. And it's like the devil has this circus. Like once he gets you agitated enough that you're listening to him more than God, he'll welcome you into this circus, which is the modern world.
Absolutely.
And then you are just almost damned. I mean, it's not irrevocable, obviously, because you're still alive. But I wrote an article last summer called The Big Parade Transitioning to Hell, about how the world culture is conditioning us to be good citizens of hell, like to just slide right in. We already love that way of life. At death, it'll just be a natural transition. It was kind of a dark article, but there are some dark aspects to our life. It's a war. It's a battle.
Well, when you were speaking about finding the weakness, it just brought an image of like boxing. The boxers go out and they're both in perfect shape, perfectly ready. But as soon as one of the weaknesses is exposed, that's what the opponent targets. Or mixed martial arts, karate, whatever. If it's a kick to the leg and they can there's a wince there, or maybe there's a cut on the eye. Well, there's the target, and then they're gonna so at first it's just a general combat. Everyone's kind of moving and everybody's kind of striking, but once the weakness is exposed, they target right in, and certainly that's exactly what the devil does. As far as the culture and that noise you speak of, something that's I've been thinking a lot about. I tend to have a little some extreme thoughts here and there as far as what's going on in the world. I think it's easy to, because we are living in extreme times. So I don't think anything's really off out of bounds here. But these movies you've heard of or you've seen, and they talk about this, or even the zombie apocalypse. Okay, so we certainly know we're not zombies. There's not zombies running around out there. And I would joke about that. I was like, we're living in this zombie apocalypse. We're here. But I started looking at it, in a different way, from a spiritual way and scriptural way. And we know that in the end times, people have itching ears and they won't adhere to teaching, and we can see that throughout history. And again, it's hard to say because we didn't live in previous generation, where we are now. Right. But looking at that and making that kind of comparison and that analogy of the noise, and that once we, concede into a bit of the noise, we're drawn more and more and more. And he's got the stronghold, and we go along with it. And if you look at the lack of faith going on now, the lack of practice of of religion, and everything else, that is kind of what our culture and our society is now. And it's really not just the United States. It's cancerous. It's worldwide. And of course, I think the United States has played a part in spreading that cancer in many ways over the years. But in a sense, I don't want to say anyone's possessed. I do believe that there are possessed people out there, that's for sure. But what do you think about, and I don't know if I want to go as far as saying obsessed, But perhaps, I don't know what the next step, you probably do, but the next step is beyond obsession. But is there, in a sense, you think that is that going on around us? I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, with all the lies, like just blatant lies that are being taught and shown, not just in religion, but in politics and media. It's just, we just look at it and we're like, how can you stand there and just lie on a grand public level? I don't know. Your response.
Yeah. There's a video I saw of a liberal news pundit just expressing his anger, irrational, like, wow, that's awkward anger at people who aren't going along with the big lies nowadays. And I saw them like, wow, I wonder what spiritual oppression he himself was under. But about a year ago, I think it was, I can't remember. I wrote an article called "Is the United States Diabolically Oppressed?" So the different stages, we have temptation. Everybody has this all the time until death. Then you have obsession. Obsession is like a really intense form of temptation where the devil permanent harassment of your intellect, bordering on visions, nightmares, voices. And Father Ripperger, famous United States exorcist, speculates that 25% of the United States culture is diabolically obsessed, which means they have this intense bombardment of diabolical thoughts. And I'm like, I believe it. I think I had some form of that too, before I went through a lot of spiritual warfare as a result of the depression. And they'll quote like the number of people who are on all these psychoactive drugs, depression, anxiety. It is a plague of pharmaceuticals. And even the ones that aren't for depression, anxiety, mess with the mind. But so that's just one level. So an exorcist, the reason I wrote the article is because an exorcist stated that he thought the United States was diabolically oppressed. So oppression would be this external orchestration by the diabolical to oppress, to agitate, to block, to frustrate, to bombard, kind of like obsession, but on the external, coming internal.
Yeah.
And it's from obsession as well. But I really think, especially what's happening the last couple of years, that the whole world is under some kind of diabolical oppression. There is an activity, and exorcists have spoken publicly about this. 2 years ago with the whole Pachamama thing, and exorcists, I don't know if you heard the story, 3 anonymous exorcists came out and said the whole Pachamama thing in the Vatican caused a spiritual unsettling, like this diabolical activity was unleashed. It's like, so demons get permission to do things when we sin. Christ grants them more permission, more leeway. So they warned the world that that Pachamama event gave permission to certain demons to act more against the world.
Explain that event, because I'm not sure if I'm that familiar with it. I don't know if anyone out there is.
Yeah, so the Pachamama was when this idol from South America was brought to the Vatican.
Right.
In October of 2019, and kind of celebrated, honored, almost venerated, and it's been kind of like a what in the world just happened moment. Right. And some people are very outspoken against it. Some people are gun shy to say anything about it. But exorcists spoke out as a result of it and said that event had a very negative spiritual effect. So, but stuff like that, if you look at the rise of witchcraft, the rise of Satanism, the occult, the decline of religion, the rise of all kinds of mortal sins, all of these give demons authority to act over us in our life. And all of that together, if you think about, if the whole world is doing this, then the whole world is under in a state of increased diabolical attack, such that you could say a state of diabolical oppression, like widespread.
Exponentially growing every day, in my opinion.
If you Google, that's one thing I discovered about a year and a half ago. If you Google metaphysical supply stores, this is what witchcraft shops are called on Google, metaphysical supply stores. And then you just just put it in the Google search, like the map, and then like zoom out and zoom in on different big cities and see the ones that pop up. I can't even count them. I wish Google could give me a count of them. Wow. You can click on them, go to their website, see what they're all about. They sell, this is a cult. The occult is everywhere, and it's in TV. You talk about the toehold, foothold, stronghold, like television. Like we have a current 0 TV policy in our home with the kids because if they start getting into it, the diabolical has inserted itself, infused itself in television.
It's everywhere. Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah, I mean, you just, of course we have this, I think if you speak of a possession, I think everyone has a Hollywood kind of perception of what that might be. And to the extreme, it certainly can be that way for sure. And I think enough exorcists have spoken about, the physical things that have happened, and even, the movie The Exorcist was based on, I'm sure, loosely or non-loosely, on actual events. And there's been subsequent movies that have come out over the years that are based on actual events. Some have done a pretty good job. And speaking of the antidepressants and the medicines, and I don't know what you've heard, but I've heard that certainly that, people who are on those, it's more difficult because you can't really get to their trueness, their essence, because it kind of blocks part of the mind and numbs part of the mind that responds to that. Even though it is a spiritual event, an exorcism, it's also involved. We're not just spiritual and we're not just physical, so it's a combination. So that you both have to be engaged. But I think that looking at the amount of rage we see, the murder rate, of course, just driving in traffic. I'm scared sometimes at some of the rage at just a simple turn, or I didn't go fast or whatever. And you can see in people's eyes the amount of it, and people are walking around with rage. And it's a scary thing. All of that's very scary. I don't think, obviously, not everyone's possessed, like we said, but the more that we go along with this, and the more this oppression. What did you the
obsession?
Yeah. So that, as this progresses, of course, the more you allow these demons to have influence and direct your actions and pull you away from God, of course, you're going to act more like a demon, and it's a scary thing. And so now, speaking of, the occult and, witchcraft and these things, of course, we're in the month of October. We start to see the ghosts are coming out, and, the pumpkins and the bats and things. I was talking to my wife yesterday. Growing up, we did trick or treat. I remember as I was in a teenager, I mean, I would dress up like a punk rocker or something, and might have been a vampire, and it was. But I look now at some of the stores and things that are being sold and put up in people's yards. I mean, they've gotten to where they're just downright evil. There's bodies wrapped in bags, and just. I mean, we had, I know there's been movies over the years, especially the 80s with Friday the 13th and Halloween and all that. We had these. These movies, these slasher movies, I guess, but they become now so graphic. So here we are. We're approaching Halloween. I don't know what to. For a while, I didn't mess with anything with Halloween. Kids came along and we didn't for a little while, and now, we're there, and I think I'll admit it. My kids, if I could just make it go away, I would. But it is what it is. So we have a werewolf, one of our son who wants to be a werewolf. And I mean, a werewolf to me is not real. I know. So that's where we kind of, and then another one wants to be a vampire, and the other's just going to be a police officer, and they're innocent enough. But in that innocence, are we playing with fire? Are we, in a lot of church, I've talked to a lot of priests, and a lot of priests say, well, it's a secular event now. Yes, it has its origins from the occult, and there's certainly an occult high holy day for the occult. Are we playing with fire with Halloween? What do you think?
Yeah, it's my birthday is the day before. Okay. So when I was a kid and very hellbound pagan, I loved Halloween for the darkness. I did not understand All Saints or anything good about it. I was mischievous. I wanted to be scared, watch horror movies, and scare people, and just enjoy the darkness of it. So when I had my conversion, I realized, my birthday is actually real close to All Saints, which is what All Hallows Eve is. I have an article on my website. I'm going to repost it soon, where I finally did the research just last year. Just like, what is Halloween? What's the problem? What's the fix? What's the origin? Where's the evil? Where's the good? Because it's almost like it's so perverted now that it takes so much digging in history to figure out what can we do. Because some people are like, let's just have a fall festival, and other people who are very traditional Catholics like, no, like that is complete abdication. Like giving it over to the culture, abandoning the holy day. This is a holy day. All Hallows Eve is what Halloween means.
Yeah.
But exorcists also note, so I feel like we might need to so traditions throughout the life of the church have emerged and have grown and changed and tweaked, and different cultures, like in England and France and Ireland, like it's different in each culture. We may just need to realize, okay, we're in a cultural shift, Catholic cultural shift. We need to kind of like reinvigorate Halloween as like, it needs to be a movement almost, because so many people are confused. They don't know what to do. And the confusion is where the devil can seize on it, because the pressure is just do what everybody else is doing. Right. It's just innocent. It's fine, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of people, even more than when I was a kid, love the dark side of Halloween. And with the rise in the occult, tangibly, statistically, and exorcists saying, whenever the Catholic Church has a high holy day, the Satanists have one the day before. And that is what they seize. They have taken whatever the historical realities are about the convergence centuries ago of this, evil, and then the holy day. They now presently utilize October 31st as a day of evil.
Right.
So even like conversations like this, like I've heard it proposed that October 31st could be the day where you reflect on hell, November 1st, heaven, and then November 2nd, purgatory.
Yeah.
And that would fit, because on the day where Satanists are celebrating and invoking spells and everything else, we should be celebrating spiritual warfare, the weapons, the fight, the risk, the fear. Like there's one tradition I remember hearing about where someone dresses up like a witch in the neighborhood, and the job of the Catholics, the tradition is to chase that witch away. Like not dress up like a witch and go door to door, but dress up and be chased away by the Catholics.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, that's fun. That's funny.
Yeah. There's a, speaking of, All Souls Day, we obviously reflecting on the souls in purgatory. One of the most beautiful practices out there, in my opinion, that I was introduced to when I was discerning a vocation. I was living in El Paso, Texas, and in a brother's novitiate. And on All Souls Day, and I can't remember which year, it was 97 or 98, the brothers we all loaded up into a van and we went to a cemetery. And of course, up until that point, I mean, I was still relatively fresh in my conversion, maybe 2-3 years. So I was coming around. But a cemetery to me prior to that was either something spooky or someplace sad, or someplace, just, a combination of grief and sadness. But I was kind of like, I didn't know what to think. They're like, we're going to the cemetery. And I'm like, what are we going to do there? Because prior to that, being in my late teens and stuff, we'd sneak out into cemetery, and just be creeped out and spook each other and just, maybe, messing with things we shouldn't be messing with. Mm-hmm. So prior to that, I had no true knowledge of understanding that. So we got there and they had holy water with them and we had rosaries, and it was the most beautiful day. I mean, this is going back 20 plus years, 30. I can't remember right now. 96, whatever that is, 2006, 16, almost 30 years, whatever, 25 years. And it was just as clear as day, walking through that cemetery and praying with those brothers and blessing the markers and looking at the names. Because I don't think it ever before that, unless I had been in the cemetery for a burial, I would ever look at anyone's names. And so I introduced that to my family when I first got married. And so we make a practice of that every year. And I think the kids at first were probably a little like, okay, but now it's a beautiful thing. And just walking through there and praying with the family, praying the rosary, it's just wonderful. And they don't have a creeped out weirdo feeling about it, like, because they understand it. And so I introduced shortly after that to the Knights of Columbus. So every year, so coming up, I'll put out some information on there, and whoever's interested, we get with Father Rue, and a tradition. It's been about 10 years now. Every year on All Souls Day if it's, works with everyone's calendar, we will set a time and we will meet at the, I think it's Settlers Cemetery in Charlotte, and we'll go through in the evening. It's usually dark, so 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in November. So it's usually dark, and we'll pray the rosary. And guys have commented on that and love that, and it's just become such a wonderful thing. So there's so many really good traditions, I agree, that we could be doing as well.
I think the issue of the dead is one spot where the devil is succeeding now. When it comes to like how I got into what I'm doing, I think with divine providence preparing me for it. I grew up in the neighborhood where I grew up. Both entrances were right next to the entrance was this massive cemetery. Whether you're going in the back or the front. And I grew up constantly seeing these massive old, like 300-year-old cemeteries. I'd ride my bike through them. There were all these hills, all these paths. So when I'm this hellbound pagan, I'm constantly around the dead or reminders of the dead. So then it made me kind of like, it was creepy. It was spooky. And that's where the devil wants us. So Christ has conquered death. He's sanctified death. Death has become a door to eternal delights, to eternal bliss with him if we are in a state of grace. So what the devil wants to do is make us afraid of death again. Yes. So by the destruction of Halloween, by the destruction of All Saints and All Souls, he's taken back death. And now death is becoming a dominion for him again, especially if we're living in a state of mortal sin. Because if we're dying in a state of mortal sin, then death is frightening. And he's trying to rub that in our faces. And I think that's part of the attack. So going to cemeteries, yes, highly recommend. We do the same thing, especially during November. And I think sometimes we get into the habit, we fall out of the habit too, of every Sunday after Mass we go to the local cemetery and drive through and pray for random people. Just read the name off the tombstone. Yeah. But going to a cemetery like in the evening at night and lighting candles everywhere, maybe even doing a procession to remember the dead are like we're going to be the dead. So it's a great time to reflect on death in a good sense, to challenge us to be holier and to be prepared.
We often we'll pray for just certain intentions and invoke certain saints, but we also pray for those who pray for us and those who have no one else to pray for them. So, man, we've covered a lot of ground. We probably could cover a lot more ground.
That's right.
But I think we're getting towards our limit here. But man, it was awesome talking with you. I'd love to bring you back on and dig into so much other material that I'm sure we could go on and on with. So I hope you have a great week, and I appreciate it and look forward to seeing you at the upcoming men's conference, but we'll be talking to you before then and get you on the obligation again.
All right, great. Yeah. Have a good rest of your week too.
All right. Thanks, Charles. And thank you guys once again for tuning in. Don't forget, registration is now open for the Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas, March 5th, 2022. Charles will be there along with Ray Garunde, Dr. John Aquaviva, Tim Staples, Keith Nestor, and our own Bishop Jugas. A day of fellowship, fun, prayer. We'll have Mass, confessions all day, and you won't want to miss it. Make sure to go online and register now. Use the promo code RADIO. Save $5. www.catholicmenofthecarolinas.org. We're also in the midst of the 30 for 30 pledge drive for Carolina Catholic Media Network. Information and donations can be made at www.carolinacatholicradio.org. If you guys have any questions about what we talked about today or any day, have any feedback, please make sure to send us an email at feedback@carolinacatholicradio.org. If you have any questions, any topics, or if you'd like to come on the show and be a guest, make sure to let us know and put a note in there, and we'd love to have you. For the Catholic Men's Conference, the Obligation Radio Show, and Carolina Catholic Media Network, this has been Jason Murphy. Look forward to talking to you next week. God bless and Esto Vir.